everybody. We are the Chemical Consultants Network, which is a nonprofit organization of over 200 consultants, chemists, chemical engineers, life scientists, and other interested scientists and engineers of other chemical allied disciplines. We hold monthly meetings on topics of interest to consultants to help our members start, practice, and enhance consulting opportunities. Our meetings cover common issues such as taxes, regulatory compliance, safety, and technical developments in science and technology. Through our website, we provide a platform to advise potential clients about our areas of expertise. The Chemical Consultants Network is supported by the Philadelphia section of the American Chemical Society and the American Institute of Chemical Engineers. So what I'd like to do today is I'd like to introduce my good friend Orlando. Orlando is a phenomenal person who has his background in law, but he went on to do better, bigger and better things. Practicing law is not where the money is. The money is in dealing with businesses. So without further ado, Orlando.
Thank you, Peter. So let's get right into it. So thinking beyond the day-to-day, I hope the controls, okay. First off, I'm going to say that my talk is not going to be linear. I'm a non-linear thinker myself. So using PowerPoint is a little restricted for me. I'm much more happier in interactive conversation. Most presentations are without visuals, but that was a request, so I threw this in here. So first thing is we're going to post, if you don't mind, as we go along, please post your questions in the chat. If you have any questions coming into this from looking at the highlight when you registered, throw them in now. I'd like to cover them. If anybody has any particular burning questions, throw them in there. I'll try to incorporate them as we go along. And of course, we'll have time at the end for Q&A. My promise for this talk today is that you will learn how to turn a consulting practice into a sellable business. Now, that may not be what everyone wants to do, but hopefully some of you will be convinced that it's worth making the effort to build a sellable practice. And to get started right away, I know a lot of people think that if you have a solo practice or you're self-employed, that you may not have anything that's sellable. Hopefully, when we go through this, you'll see things a little differently. We'll go through some myths and perhaps some false assumptions. But I'm going to start off with giving you a little proof in the pudding and give an example of a business that I sold a couple of years ago. It was a one-man shop, home-based business. Maybe that relates for a lot of you guys, right? The business itself grossed $247,000 in sales. This was gross receipts. Cost of goods for this, it was an IT consulting business, was $77,000. That the cost of goods constituted different things like wiring and materials for repairs, hardware repairs and such. Employee expense was $7,500 for the year. He had one or two 1099 employees. So think about, you're working with peers, and I heard some of this here, some collaboration and partnerships here, where you're resourcing out some of your bigger projects you need help with. 1099, you don't have to have a W-2 employee. You're still a solo, self-employed person. This person had $7,500 in 1099 contractor payments. Other overhead expenses, including, their phone, personal phone, internet, server, all those kind of things that they use and tools and of the trade, was $36,500. The adjusted, I put in here projected gross profit, just because we can never promise, of course, to a buyer what the revenue would be. But this is another word for this number of 126,000 sellers discretionary earnings, SDE. It's a term of art for our business. Some you may have heard EBITDA or other forms of referring to the cash flow of the business. But for now, I might interchangeably just refer to it as cash flow. And cash flow, 126,000. This is what was available to the owner of, self-employed owner of this business to do whatever he wanted to do with it. Okay, so you can obviously the tax return is one thing. and how much taxes you pay on this is a different thing, right? Because again, for accounting purposes, you can have depreciation. You do a lot of different things to change your taxable income. But this is what a buyer should be able to get out of buying this business. We sold it for $255,000, a little more than $250,000. So think about that. I wanted to just right off the bat shatter maybe the idea that this isn't applicable to you. It very much is. So let's get right into it. Why is this important? It is important to know that it is possible to sell your practice. Okay. Your business can grow without sacrificing your freedom or your chosen lifestyle. When you probably left, the corporate world or whatever employment you had, you've had some things you've considered. And one of the things that, of course, you guys are here is you went into self-employment. You're consulting. You're a gun for hire, if you will. When you stepped into that role, you probably thought about the things you wanted to do and didn't want to do. Perhaps you didn't want a boss. Perhaps you didn't want micromanagement and supervision. Perhaps you didn't want to work long hours or be responsible for a certain type of responsibilities. You wanted to do what you wanted to do, but at the same time, you're not put out to pasture. So, you have a lifestyle. You're designing something in your mind that you want to do. Maybe you want to work 30 hours a week, whatever it is, but there's a very comprehensive picture you had in your mind. But you should nonetheless build a company that you can sell one day so you can add to your retirement nest egg. Okay. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why you should do that. And the analogy I think I want to use is the story of Sisyphus. Everyone knows the story of Sisyphus, right? So he's here you go. He's, I think it was a Greek mythology. He's a trickster. He tricked death twice. And in hell or death, he was tasked with pushing a boulder up the hill forever, perpetually. He will never stop working and toiling, pushing this boulder up the hill. All right, that's how he's going to suffer. And I want you to use that analogy for yourself. When you worked for someone else, you had a W-2 job, okay, W-2 employment. That wasn't sellable. There was nothing you built in that. You toiled, you worked, you got paid for your time. Now that that's over, you get to do it again. And you're doing it now as a consultant. But again, that's what I want you to change. I want you to think about this. I understand the challenges you're faced with as a solo consulting business, right? Perhaps you have inconsistent income or cash flow. Perhaps you don't feel like you can hire or do other things to grow, but we're going to cover that, or at least touch on it. And again, post any questions you have in the chat on any of these things. Market perceptions, evaluation concerns, right? So like if, you may think if you don't have employees, you're just an individual, all of the information is in your mind, in your head, then how can you sell that? You may have some of those concerns. The limitation of one person operation in terms of scalability and growth. Obviously, when someone's looking to buy a business, they're looking to grow through acquisition. Now, obviously, it's a clear concern. And there's common challenges encountered by solo consultants that I really want to touch into, but I think we all know what those are, and they don't really reflect what you would think is something that's sellable. So the first myth, I hope I already busted, the idea that you have to have employees to consider yourself a real business, or the myth that you have to work really hard to make a sellable business is flawed. You don't have to get $1 million in cash flow. Okay. You don't have to have 10 or 20 employees all under your responsibility. The truth is the opposite is true. A practice that creates a comfortable living with a comfortable income is attractive to buyers. So the buyer of that other company was a larger company that had multiple locations. They were I would call a lower middle market business. Okay. They probably didn't make $1 million in EBITDA or cash flow. So they're still in my realm of Main Street businesses, small to medium-sized businesses. When you get into $1 million of cash flow and above, you're, definitely deeper into the private equity realm. And you're starting to enter the mergers and acquisitions realm where a lot of the bigger players with deep pockets are looking to buy. they're probably not going to be interested. But this particular buyer, bigger shark, right, bigger whale, consumed multiple small practices into their practice. So they had geographic reach and customer acquisition growth. So since they already had their platform with, you know, their administrative systems, their accounting systems, and financial controls, they had a lot of things they already needed. It's very easy for them to leverage up the existing customer base. And so if you, first tip I would like you to think about is to easily step into creating a comfortable lifestyle for yourself, right? But grow. If it's an easy business, you're not working too hard, you have good customers, a good clientele, someone else would like to buy that. So here's my simple formula for what's a sellable business. The first, it has income. As you saw in the other illustration in the example, real life example, was $126,000 in what I call cash flow, right? The lifestyle of this person was that he mostly worked from home. He rarely had to step out of his home to go see a client. And he would probably check in once a month or once a quarter, depending on the client. And they were pretty local, you know, within about 1 or 2 counties of him. That made it a sellable business. Now, I want to circle back and add another layer to this simple formula, because the devil's in the details. But the income that he generated, he created, was through recurring revenue. He had managed services for his clientele. So most of them had monthly income or monthly payments to him on an engagement fee. They didn't really have he didn't have a contract. There was no contract. So it wasn't like a 1-year term, 2-year terms. It was just go, you know, pay as you go. The relationship had been for many of them for several years because he built a reputation and he didn't need to have contracts. But again, it made it sellable. So this is and again, please post questions and stop me if you need to. How much can you sell for? This is a typo. Sorry. I'm going to step into the formula. And so I pulled up the data, one of my reference guides. And in this particular case, it comes from the business reference guide. The data was last updated August 2023. They update the data once a year. So maybe August of this year, they'll update it. But in the management consulting business, so some of you may be looking at managing some operations and other systems inside businesses. This particular type of consulting business, if the business made under $1 million in net sales, the most likely multiple of the SDE, which is the orange number, sales discretionary earnings, the cash flow I was referring to in the other illustration, is just a little less than 2 times multiple. And in fact, if you remember, it was 126,000 was cash flow, sales price closed and settled was 255. It was roughly 2 times multiple. So I want to now talk about some of the things you should be thinking about as you operate your own business. You're creating a lifestyle, you have your consulting business. What should you be looking at? Well, the first thing is standardizing your service offerings. Okay. A lot of times when you're getting started, and I heard an example of, you know, when you first start, there's not a lot of business coming in. But after a little while, you build a reputation, you get a network, you're getting some referrals. One customer refers you to the next, one client refers you to the next, and you're getting income. You should think about creating value beyond your personal expertise, okay? You can productize yourself or your knowledge, and you do that by developing your proprietary methodologies or your products. So what does this mean, right? Standardizing your service offerings. So number one, you do want to do your best to stand out with your own unique service proposition, right? Your own unique selling proposition. Even though there are others that do what you have the same background, you are uniquely your own experience. You're uniquely your own person. I think you can find a way to separate yourself from other competitors. So when you're out there selling that, you should somehow standardize that service and not take any type of business that comes through the, you know, through the transom. Let me see if I can pull up, and I can't pull up my notes here. Okay, so here's some thoughts here. Brainstorm all the services that you can provide today. Take a little chart, map it out on a piece of paper, chart out on the x-axis something that's teachable. What you do and you can sell, is it teachable or not on the x-axis? I'm sorry, on the x-axis is the what's the client value, and on the y-axis put is it teachable? Okay, so you got that. So you kind of imagine that. First thing I want you to do is eliminate the services that clients need to buy only once. Think about the services that you can offer that are going to be on a recurring revenue. Okay, so it's not project oriented necessarily, although that may be an entrance into the relationship. Think about offering, again, that standard service offering that has recurring revenue. Now, among the remaining that you've eliminated, pick the one that is plotted closest to the top right corner of the diagram or chart. It is a high value to the client, and it's very teachable, i.e. you can delegate. This becomes your standard service offering. And then I want you to think about experimenting with bundling services together, okay? So that's step one. Step two is once you've put that out there and you're actually making revenue and this is you're building traction, I want you to implement systems and processes, right? Build a scalable business model that you can later then hire and train additional staff, or establish partnerships and collaborations that I talked about before, right? With independent contractors yourself. You guys are engineers, right? We like repeatable systems. We like repeatable outputs, right? So it should be easy for you to think about documenting your process for executing these types of services. Define each step so that you can repeat the model the same way each time, right? Write an instruction manual. Instructions should be specific enough for someone to follow independently by using examples and fill in the blanks. Test instruction manuals by asking someone to deliver the service without your involvement. And it shouldn't be a peer or a colleague, right? Because they kind of fill in the blanks. They know too much. Come up with a name for your standard service offering and each step, right? So that's kind of a trademark, intellectual property. You create intellectual property. Even though, by the way, please, even if you know it already exists and someone else is doing the same thing, come up with a name. Think about, I think Peter probably can come up with a lot of examples on this, but I think one that comes to mind is Coors. Coors Light talked about, that when they advertised, they talked about the spring water and mountains and all that stuff. Like they're talking about processes and things that every beer maker does, right? They have refined water or clean water distributed. There's no other junk in it, whatever. But they just led with that in their advertising, gave it a name, and they stood out in their branding for that. It would move you when you do that, when you name your standard, when you give it a name unique to you that nobody can Google and find another person doing it, it will move you away from commoditized services. You'll be able to set the price and the payment terms. Okay. Write a description of the features and corresponding benefits for each step. And then revamp all your communications, your customer communications, describe your process. So they're being trained and onboarded as well, right? Again, everything's systemized. Now, once you've created a positive cash flow, you want to create a consistent cycle of that too. I did see, I can't remember his name, but he had a book and he was a guest speaker with you guys I'm not sure how long ago, but he did comment about charging upfront for your standard service offerings, right? Or your offerings, your services. He talked about how afraid he was doing that and how silly he felt after being able to do it later. I think it was 10 years in the business, I think he said. And he finally got to start doing some upfront retainers. I don't know if anyone remembers this story. I may have notes in here somewhere about that, but in any event, think about doing that. Really, go back to that, look at your notes. It will give you the cash you need to operate without diluting yourself or getting in shareholders. If you really think about getting big, you may not be able to charge for the entire amount in advance, but it would obviously help you in your cash flow. And you probably have to talk to your accountant, okay? Because it's going to look really lumpy. You kind of want to amortize that out so you have good looking cash flows, kind of on the balance sheet side of things. So keep your income pretty smooth, okay? And eventually, when you have that retained earnings and you have what you need, you can start looking at removing yourself from the selling process because you've already done it and you've replicated it. And a little hint, this is from Built to Sell. This is someone else, a peer or a colleague in the industry. He focuses on, he has a book that he published. I read his book. I thought about collaborating with him and being one of his advisors. But in any event, it comes from him. And he talks about one tip that he had was the best salesperson would be those used to selling a product, not selling services. Even though you're a service provider, the best salesperson that you can hire, and you don't have to, again, do a W-2, right? You can do it on success fee. There's a lot of agencies out there, a lot of outsourced salespeople, but look for someone who can sell products and have more experience in that. Avoid the salespeople who come from professional service companies. And eventually hire at least, if you can, get to 2 salespeople. Again, there is no set standard here. These are just kind of some ideas and benchmarks you can think about, you can kind of reach for. But if you can get to 2 salespeople, then they become competitive. And an acquirer would like to see the redundancy, right? You can have multiple salespeople. So I will stop there because, this isn't really about advice, consulting for you on how to build a business, but I'm on the other side of the mirror, right? I can advise on small businesses, help them prepare for their business, their sale, their exit within, say, a 6-month to an 18-month horizon. And so these are kind of the things that we talk about all the time. Just jump in there and fly, as we go. We build it all out. So there's a couple questions here. For the example you've given, did the purchasing company have all the expertise of the original owner? Yes, they did. And again, I know there's the trap that you feel like only you know something. But again, if you can teach it, if you could put your professor hat, put your lecturer hat, your part-time teacher hat, it's something that can be sold and become transferable. And as far as the question, why would someone want to buy a business that they can do themselves? It is actually, in my opinion, and a lot of people out there, of course, agree with this, it is a smarter thing to grow through acquisition. You know how painful it is and how long it takes to build your business. Mm-hmm. So why go through that? It's less risky. You have the team members in place. You have the customers in place. You have the relationships. Everything's there. You have the cash flow. It's proven. And you can peg your risk rate on how much you want to pay as a ratio of how much you want to return on your investment. So it's a really smart way to go. Peter asked, why won't standardizing my services make me a commodity? No. So what I tried to explain was that think about your little niche in the world, right? You can niche down, okay? But once you have your niche, you need to come up with some trademarkable naming language around your business, your process, and your product and services, okay? And again, you can think about like Coors, like in beer making, right? That's an example of they all make beer. They pretty much have the same process. There's nothing unique. There was nothing special about them. But in their advertising, they led with, and there's a name for this, but I'm trying to come up with another example. Peter, do you have an example? Any thoughts on any trademarks of business, services or products of companies that pretty much do the same thing someone else does, their competitors do, but they were able to separate themselves?
Right.
by
I mean,
positioning.
that's a magic bullet. You want to go ahead and try to separate yourself from everybody else, and you can go ahead and do it with, for example, luxury goods. So you can go ahead and have a I don't know, a bag that may cost $20, but you put a Coach label on it, or you put a Gucci label on it, and it's all of a sudden it becomes so much more valuable. You can do that with cars, with pretty much anything. Look at for example, cell phones. You have Apple. Apple has that cache because they try to differentiate themselves from all the other phones. Everybody's an Android, but we are the Apple, and so forth.
Yeah. Um,
Is that what I was was that what you're asking?
yeah, it's an example.
Okay.
And for them, you know, pricing became their way of separating themselves from the rest of the market. You will have to have a lot of courage to increase your price. Think about universities. Universities, the tuition is growing much faster than the GDP or inflation.
Mhm.
Why is that? Well, if you get to pay a big tuition, you must be going to an Ivy League university. There's an association, there's a space in the mind of the consumer that says that the more pricey this thing is, the more valuable it is, the more elite, the more exclusive it is. It's the same thing for pricing the clothing or cars. I think Jaguar is a good example in their history and how they marketed Jaguar. I mean, it's a crappy car, from what I understand. Really, it still is probably a crappy car. It's hard to say. There's really nothing special about it. There's no great engineering to it. But because they have this kind of branding, price point, they're exclusive, they become sexy. And by buying into that product, the consumer gets to take a different place and feel good about themselves in a different market. And again, I can't remember the gentleman's name. He had a book. I forget what it's called. Do you, anybody know that book, that the gentleman who spoke about that?
Was that Chad?
He had what was the name of the book? I feel so bad for not being able to remember. Anyway, see if I can find it. So I did jot it down somewhere. In any event, I hope that answers a little bit.
Thank you.
Help you get a little closer to that. And I think I clicked this button by accident. Okay. All right. So moving forward, so what does it take to sell? Okay. So this is kind of the realm I'm in. When you're looking to sell a business, you hire a business broker or M&A advisor or business intermediary. Means the same thing. You can search those terms and it says the same thing. For us at ASPIRA Business Brokers and Advisors, we try to we incorporate the best practices of an M&A kind of deal, a higher standard of care to smaller businesses. So if you were looking to sell, we're happy to help. There's no business that's too small for us to help. Okay, I think the smallest business that I was part of when I was in a prior company was $60,000. That was for me personally. Another colleague, the business sold for $10,000. It was a kiosk business in the mall, and the entire thing went to our commission because our minimum commissions are $15,000. But he did it because he wanted to get out of the lease. He had a noose around his neck. He just wanted out. It was not making any money, so he just sold the inventory, and he just needed to do it fast. So again, when we have a buyer pool, we're kind of the marketplace. My colleague was able to deliver on that and get him out very quickly. But for us, we have. I always say a two-step process, but for today, I'm going to incorporate a three-phase process. The first phase, it's no different than say, let me use some analogies you might be familiar with, like listing your house. So we get a listing agreement. Once you list with us, we do a pre-due diligence of your business. We figure out MPSB, which is the most probable sales price. You'll know in advance before signing that, but we get much more accurate in that. This is where we vet any issues, any hair on the deal. And despite every business has its imperfections. There's no such thing as a perfect business. So every business has a negative. It's an art and science for us. We can take a negative and make it a positive. We never lie. We never hide anything. In fact, I like to lead with a negative and turn it into positive. In the real estate side, again, I think you can relate to buying a home or selling a home. We are also real estate brokers. So an example of this would be a house that had 3 bedrooms, but 2 of the bedrooms had practically no closet. They're very small. The entire house is very small. So when we initially put it up for sale, you had it was 1.5 baths, 3 bedrooms, had a driveway, 2-car driveway. So it was enough that a family would come out, husband and wife and kids. And we were getting, of course, traffic on it, but unfortunately, all the men were saying, "No, this is way too small for me. I can't do this. This is not even a bedroom." They were complaining. So then I took that and I said, "Okay, this is not working out. So let's reposition this in the advertising." We advertise it as a cozy home, quaint home. We're using language that resonated. What we realized was more women. Because women generally going in, men, it was a stereotype, but men going into buying a home, they want more room. They want the man cave downstairs, that kind of thing, right? Women are always thinking about, well, is this really practical? Is this going to be energy efficient? This is more a house that I need to clean. I don't want to deal with this. I don't need all that, right? So don't you know, when we changed the advertising, we repositioned it, took the negative, we made it a positive, and the next 3 people that came out turned out to be single mothers with 1 child. They happen to all have 1 child around the same age, about 10 years old. And when they toured it and they left, they said, "Oh my gosh, this is so great. This is wonderful." We got the right buyer. We got the right position and match in the marketing. So this is the type of work we do, in the phase 1 before we start advertising. In phase 2, we start marketing confidentially. Once the client authorizes us to start marketing, we got the pricing right, we got the positioning right, we start marketing it. We do so confidentially. No one should know you're for sale, right? In any business, usually we're hired for confidentiality. It would disrupt their client. You don't want your clientele walking away. You don't want your employees, if you had any, feeling nervous and going somewhere else. So we do that confidentially, and it's sufficient information so that the right type, again, same thing, the right type of buyer will reach out to us. We vet each buyer. We protect the client through non-disclosure agreements. Everyone has to sign that before we even disclose the name of the business. And then we have a process that moves them forward to get to an LOI, basically with soliciting an offer. In phase 3, we go from an accepted offer, an LOI, to closing. This is also very a tricky situation or phase, because due diligence is very difficult. Sometimes if you don't prepare well, some of the stats on that is nationally, some of the stats I've seen is that 50% of accepted offers close, settle, or reverse that, flip it. 50% of accepted offers is fail. Well, why is that? Buyer and seller agreed. Everybody's happy. I think it's all in the due diligence. And so we do our homework on both sides, and our stats are probably 90-something%. We're pretty much guaranteed to close. There's been a few, I can only think about 2 situations where we didn't close. And they were under really strenuous situations. Like one client, they were in a bankruptcy matter, and we had a timeline, just couldn't do it. The client did not have a good relationship with the landlord. And the landlord was really screwing the client. I mean, I brought a buyer in. They negotiated I think it was like a 300, I can't remember the exact number, maybe a $350,000 lease value over, say, 5 years or 3 years, whatever it was. And the landlord was arguing for $10,000. They really made it difficult. They really drug it out. I think they really, and ultimately we just couldn't do the deal. Funny enough, that landlord reached out to me and said, "Hey, can you represent us? You did a great job." Like, that's really messed up. That's really messed up that they did that. So that's how I knew. But in any case, some of the stats, you can expect to take anywhere between 6 months to a year to sell a business. Okay. The odds of selling are really low. You know, for sale by owners are pretty much almost guaranteed to not sell. You're not going to realize any gain. With most brokers, the percentage increase, you got like a 10x increase. But for us, I think we're about the three things we measured was our success rate, speed to close, and the value we drove. And the first two, I think you can play with those stats. It's always wonky, especially after COVID, things have changed. But one thing that we're really proud of is that the value we drive. That has never changed. So anytime we've had a client that have actually made an effort to sell prior to working with us, whether it's with a competitor or selling on their own, we were able to beat that alternative, that competitor, by 25 to 50%. So an example of a franchisee business owner who, through the franchise system, attempted to sell $600,000. He failed to close. He couldn't sell. He couldn't close them. He got frustrated. Asked another colleague, said, "Who did you work with?" They reached out to us, referred us. We worked with him, and we got him a deal in the contract for $750,000.
Wow!
So with our commission, he made more than 10% above what he originally wanted to. He was originally looking for. He was happy with. He just couldn't close it, and we got the buyer a couple $100,000 in working capital and capital improvements to improve on the business, to put him in a much stronger position. So we have plenty of examples of those. We've never failed to beat that by 25 to 50%. In any event, post-settlement, we're not involved anymore really, but we do try to, help out. We will check in with the sellers and the buyers, how they're doing. The seller, whenever you sell your business, you have to keep in mind that you're going to have to train the new owners. You'll have to do that. You have to provide that transition, usually free of cost for some period of time. It could be a couple of weeks, it could be a month, it could be two, whatever. It could be a couple of hours each week, whatever it is, but you got to transition. A lot of times, especially in this type of service business, you can assume that the person would want to hire you maybe for a year, and you can negotiate some type of rate. So you can do a consulting fee, or you can do about an hourly rate. You can do whatever you want to do. But it's nice to add a little more comfort to the buyer that there's a longer transition period. It gets you more money. And when to prepare for sale. I know we're coming short here at 7:20. When to prepare at the beginning. You really should be thinking about the end in mind when you start. Everything from forming your entity, having your books separate from yourself, not working really truly as a sole proprietor, separating your bank accounts, not commingling funds, if you will, right? Having good accounting, having good practices in your business. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to spend a lot of money, but you should begin making that effort at the beginning. Now, I'll tell you a quick story, kind of skipped in the beginning, that's personal. When I started as a business broker, I started with Tannenbaum and Meta at the time, that's what their name was. But in 1946, they started as, I believe, Tannenbaum and Mylask. They were the longest, oldest continuously running business brokers that I could find in the entire country, right here in my neck of the woods. And they were the largest in the region. They had a really strong reputation. So I came in probably 2011, I think it was, about 13 years ago. And so I started my practice. I had built my business as a self-employed person as an advisor inside their house. Within a year, I was very successful. Now I was sitting in the president's seat, the owner's seat. I was hiring, firing, training, managing. I was building software and new websites and systems for their business. I was doubling their pipeline and everything within 60 days. Okay. But I negotiated to be the broker's broker. I was going to either buy and acquire the company, the firm, or I was going to get a commission for selling it, for growing it. Unfortunately, there's a little hanky-panky, little backroom deal with another person at the office who had a relationship with it for 25 years. And they did a deal. I didn't want to be involved with it. I said, that's fine. I'm not triggering my first right of refusal or anything like that. Just I'm moving forward. And I considered, I don't take anything personal, but I considered working with them as a VP and looking at partnerships, but it didn't work out. So here I am with ASPIRA Business Brokers and Advisors. and I'm in total control, but I did it 3 times. This is the third time. This time I knew going in that I want to create something that's sellable. I'm not doing it again, right? It was kind of like Sisyphus, who just did it once, did it twice. It's like, you know what? I'm not doing that again. I'm not getting caught in that same mistake, right? So now I'm here and probably be here into my retirement. But I have a long-term play for ASPIRA, and my vision, hopefully the next 10 years or shorter, is to create a marketplace for the buying and selling of privately held businesses that rival Wall Street. And that rival Wall Street is the 3 words that make this audacious. Wall Street, as you all know, big corporations have the luxury of being able to liquidate ownership and go back and forth within a fraction of a second. You can go on any app you want and trade on Apple stock or Facebook stock within a second, very quickly. You can't do that with privately held businesses. So my goal is to be able to do that. Same thing. I need to build a proprietary platform, and then scale that. But it's a slow process. But nonetheless, these are the things I'm working on and focusing on. And that's what ASPIRA is about. But I use that example and I use that story to remind you and to let you know that despite how small you are, you may in fact have something that's sellable. I'm always happy to do a one-on-one conversation to answer those questions and to explore that with you at no cost initially, right? Just to explore that with you guys. And that's it. So I think I'm going to turn it over to, open up the mic, and we have about 5 minutes here or more. I can hang around a little longer if you like.
Got a quick question for you. Thank you very much for this presentation. Wow, I mean, this is exactly what we were looking for. I mean, this is exactly right up the alley, because we are most of us are struggling exactly with this type of a thing. How do we get out of this business once we want to retire? Do we wind it down, or do we sell it off as a business? My question is, what is your experience, or the experience of your colleagues regarding selling the business piecemeal? Meaning, some buyers do not want to buy a particular part of it. They want to buy only certain types of clients, and somebody else may want to buy the other clients. How does that work?
That's rare. In my experience, that's rare. Most owners who come to us are looking to sell the entire thing. They want to retire. They want to cash out all their chips. But there is that option for sure. There is that option if you're a certain size and you're attractive to some of these smaller PE players, some of these smaller independent searchers. One of the ways they try to be attractive as a buyer is to come in with, say, a majority stake, say 60% ownership of the business, keep you on 40%, sell you on the proposition that they're, because of their resources and what they can add to value add, what they can add into the business, it would be this number. And there's an arbitrage situation. So maybe in the beginning, you're valued at one number and you took 60% off the table. But now it's at this number and it's a higher multiple, it's a higher valuation, and you're taking now 40% off the table later, a year, 2, 3 years or more later. But generally speaking, again, that's more of the lower middle market deals. And I know that this is a term of art, but I personally like to separate the size of the businesses and how they get pursued by the income. So if you're making less than $500,000 in cash flow, you're a Main Street business, right? Just Main Street, right? So we have a dealership in Delaware, makes $400,000. We have a catering business in Pennsylvania, makes a little over $400,000. Right? Good income. Been around for many years, both of them 20 some years. They have a great reputation, good employees, everything's in place. Customers keep coming back. So it's very sellable. We're looking at, but there's other challenges in it. So in any event, that's still Main Street. Okay. above 500,000 to $1 million, I would say upper Main Street. So some publicly traded companies may come in to look to buy them. I had a auto body business that were looking at selling with, I was negotiating with publicly traded companies to sell, and they were making less than 8.5 million. So, but more so the upper number. Okay. And then $1 million and above, $1 million in EBITDA. So you look at your tax return and you look at your earnings and you add back your tax, interest, and depreciation amortization. And you can see is $1 million and above. That becomes a new threshold where now you're into the bigger P. And at that threshold, you might see more of that, Peter.
Okay.
There was another question here from David Mitchell. Besides large companies, who are the typical buyers of a chemistry-related consulting business? So believe it or not, I'm just going to answer that generically because consulting is a wide term and wide range of specialties and expertise. It really doesn't matter whether it's chemistry or something else, in my opinion. You can find your peers who may want to buy you out. And you may find those that are a little bit bigger than you, and you can find those that are a lot bigger than you. They may all want to buy. Again, the idea is that someone else wants to grow, but they want to grow quickly. And they've pegged that growth and that rate of return based on what was already built. Does that answer your question, David?
Yes. The minute you mentioned peers, that kind of the light bulb came on. So that was thanks. That was I never thought of that. I never thought of peers or someone wanting to get in and grow quickly because, like I said, I started in 2018 and I'm still learning. So
yeah, let's flip this for you, David. So let's say, hey, you say, Orlando, I'd like to grow my practice by acquiring someone else's practice. How can we do that? Right? So there's ways to structure this where everyone's made to be safe in the deal. A lot of times, as you can imagine, the seller, business owner says, I want to be out. I want to be done with this. I want to get all my pennies. I want to go home. I don't want to deal with this anymore. But you know what? When you really didn't care anyway for a retirement fund, you really didn't need perhaps every single penny, right? And you want to stay busy. I think it's a great idea to have other structures like an earnout. And an earnouts, it's like saying, well, look, there's a way of structuring where they say, if I can make the number you're talking about, you've been doing already, if I can at least keep that consistent, I'll give you a certain dollar amount. But if I go, say, 10% below, I had to change the price. You say, no problem. But if we hit some numbers that I think I can get us to, then I'm going to get you even a bigger price. Okay. And there's a scale and you could do a lot of different things, but you're working together now. And it's kind of like what Peter was talking about. Like, well, let's work together, David. And, we're going to be transitioning. We're going to be coming to the client calls with me. You're going to be helping with them. You're going to be taking care of some things. They know you just as well as they know me. And maybe after a year or so, you're in the driver's seat. They don't really care if it's David or John Doe. And you've now grown through acquisition. I'll tell you, it's a really interesting thing that's happening right now, a phenomenon that's been around for many decades, but it's exponentially grown recently, is what we call search funders. These are graduate students, MBA grads, who are not going out into employment. They're graduating right into business ownership. So they're literally looking for an acquisition without a job, without any background experience, and taking over. And they have, because of their background, maybe because they were willing to work really hard and put a lot of hours in, they have investors and partners who will come in to fund the deal. There's a partnership and collaboration in acquiring it, and everyone has their piece, and you can figure out how that piece gets worked out. So there's ways to think about this for yourself as well. There's a lot of iterations here. There's a lot of flavor in this idea of buying and selling businesses. You can do this for yourself on getting started. You can do this in growing. There's a lot involved. There's really too much to kind of get into detail here. I kept this at a high level. And again, I hope I accomplished my goal of convincing you that you shouldn't just shut down the possibility that you have a business that can be sold. Yes, there are challenges. We covered those, and they're real. It makes it more difficult, and your percentage of selling is going to go down. But it can be done. And you can improve those odds of selling your business or your practice your consulting practice if you keep certain things in mind. There's a book, like I said, Built to Sell. That's one book. And there's plenty others you can look for to help get you, think about how you're building your own business and you're building your lifestyle. I've never seen a business owner in these smaller businesses that, in any size really, that hasn't built a business around them. It was their lifestyle. They like to do certain things and the business works around them.
Yeah, thanks. That was very helpful.
You got it. You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming here and giving us a great presentation. I mean, this is phenomenal, and this is the really the type of things that we need to be learning about this. And I do appreciate you allowing us to record this, because this is going to be a very I think this is going to be a very popular video, because what you're talking about is things that people should be thinking about, but they don't really do that from the start.
Yes. I want to commend all of you who are here, because I think you have the right mindset, that you're open to thinking about this a little differently, right? And I know that I've said some surprising things that are perhaps contrarian or perhaps counterintuitive, but I applaud you for being here. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it.
It was a
Okay,
pleasure
I
meeting
hope
you
to
guys.
see everybody in next month at a picnic, and watch for your email for more information on that. Bye-bye.
Okay.
know.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Orlando.
See ya.